and hopefully everyone can get their headsets in place and ready. Welcome to today's event focused on securing indigenous peoples and local communities' forest tenure. We're lucky to be able to welcome Juan Carlos Cintiac, Executive Secretary of the Global Alliance for Territorial Communities, to provide a keynote to begin today's proceedings. So Juanca, please, if I could welcome you to the podium and you can get us started today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. So, my name is Juan Carlos Cintiac. I'm Shuar indigenous from the rainforest of Ecuador. I'm here and going to speak on behalf of the Global Alliance of Indigenous People from the territory. It's a real pleasure to bring the voices from the indigenous organizations from Indonesia, Amman, from Congo Basin, Repaliac, Amazon Basin, COICA, and PV Brazil, or Mesoamerican MPV. I am very grateful for this dialogue within the framework of the FCLP platform, a space where we are working together. And in Oslo, in June of this year, the proposal from the Global Alliance for Indigenous with Territory to build the foundation of what we are discussing here today. This effort demonstrates the importance of acting with indigenous people and local community as allies, as partners, not only as beneficiaries. We must be in the decision-making spaces, as this is necessary, the first step without which nothing else will work. So we need to build and work together. Today, as we are really here in the second week on this COP29 in Baku, the ascent is not encouraging. It's very difficult and very track negotiations. The new collective quantified goal is progressing very slowly. So in the debate continues to ignore the historical responsibility of the global north in financing solutions to the climate crisis. Additionally, not only the colonial practices between the countries remain strong, but colonies toward peoples has yet to be addressed. Direct financing is still not a central topic in the negotiation, reflecting to a deeply unequal financial structure. Here, we have an opportunity to perhaps change this scenario. From this space, we urgently call an expansion to a strengthening for the call of action that we have formulated. This is a chance for more countries to commit to concrete actions to protect indigenous and local communities' territory, to face the climate crisis not with words but with actions. Our territories are much more than land. They are our life, culture, and spiritual connection. That is the real meaning for indigenous people and local communities. The data leaves us no doubt that we host 24% of the carbon and the tropical forests, and 40% of the world's most intact forests. Yet only as a fraction of this legally recognized, this leaves us as vulnerable to invasions, illegal mining, and extractive activities, and threatened not only our existence, but also to the planet of the future. To move forward, we propose 4 key priorities. 1, clear and measurable national commitments. Countries must include concrete objectives in their national determined contributions NDC to recognize and protect our territories. Without us, the 1.5 Celsius centuries target at the global biodiversity preservation will not only be achieved. Second one, land tenure rights. We demand accelerated process to legally guarantee our lands. We govern up the 39% of the most ecological intact areas, but over 1.3 billion hectares remain without legal recognitions. Securing these rights is a fair an effective solution to climate change. Number 3, respect for all rights and traditional knowledge. We reaffirm the need for free, prior informed, and informed consent, FPIC, a recognition to all knowledge, a key tools to address the climate and biodiversity crisis. Number 4, the real financial commitment. We need ambitious and transparent financials co-designed with our communities. Platforms led by us, like Shandia, are essential to address current challenges. Today we call on the governments present here to join a call action, setting ambitious goals to protect our territories. We also urge multilateral organizations to abandon colonial practices, open decision-making spaces as unwarranted funding for our rights. This is not a solution to the climate change and biodiversity crisis without fully securing our territories and rights. It's the time to move forward, work to concrete actions. Our territories are part of the solutions. We are part of the solutions. And the path of the COP30, we must have turning point to consolidate this understandable and in practice. Thank you very much and enjoy this day.
Thank you very much, Juanca. So I appreciate that we've started a little bit late, so we're going to have to do some reorganizing of the panels. Originally, we had wanted to have a discussion around the Forest Tenure Funders Group and the pledge from Glasgow and how that is moving forward, and then have a discussion around political commitments across different tropical forest countries. But given schedules, we're going to mix this up a little bit now. So if I could invite the following to the stage. Please, Raquel Soto, Vice Minister of Strategic Development of Natural Resources of the Ministry of Environment of Peru. Tatiana Roa, Vice Minister of Environmental Planning of the Territory, Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia. Francisco Felipe, Minister of Indigenous Peoples Advisory, Brazil. Maggie Charnley, Head of the UK Government's International Forest Unit, and finally Dr. Heike Henn, Director of the Subdivision for Climate and Energy in the German Ministry of Development Cooperation. Okay. If you have the interpretation on, 5 is Spanish and 3 is Portuguese. Carla, is 1 English? Okay, and English is in your ears as you have it now. So thank you very much for being here, Vice Ministers and senior officials. I wanted to start first of all with Francisco, and we are obviously very hopeful and excited that Brazil is hosting COP30 and that Brazil is such a leader in this space. And we wanted to understand whether you have any plans to highlight land tenure rights as part of one of the key climate and nature solutions at COP30.
Hello, good morning to everyone. I would like to greet the panel and thank you FCROP to the invitation to be present here. On behalf of Minister Sonia Guajajara. She has said that we have to organize the best and the biggest indigenous participate in the history of COPs and international negotiations as a whole. And we at the Ministry divide this guidance into 3 main fronts. The first front is the logistic. After all, we are expecting around 5,000 indigenous peoples in Belém. And we need to everyone to be welcome and able to both have a good experience at the COP and also provide a good experience and dialogues with those who will be coming to Brazil. Making the COP a COP with an indigenous face is so important to us. The second front is in negotiations. we want that the indigenous voice and agendas must be heard more in negotiations, because, like Juanca said, we are sure that many of the planet's solutions involve territorial protection and land tenures and recognition of traditional indigenous knowledge. If the logistics front is to give the indigenous face to the COP, the negotiations front is to, in the minister's words, reforest the hearts and the minds of the negotiators. The third front is that we are calling legacy. We need the COPs in Belém not to be an event, but also to strengthen in structural ways indigenous projects and organizations directly, and indigenous policies from the countries around the world. And in this sense, we have no doubt that a new ambition and more diversified pledge is so important, and as it will be a decisive part of this legacy that we want to deliver. I think that's not one of the most, but could be the most important part of this legacy. And it will be even more important because it brings territorial protection, the land tenure, to the center of the debate. I'm going to bring some examples from Brazil, example that my colleague Ana Paté said last week. Because in the last 2 weeks we have advanced in some special moments in Brazil. For example, we have advanced in the demarcation cycle. The Lula government has already done more than in the last 10 years. But last week, we concluded historic regularization in the territory of Guarani Kaiowá people, who have suffered for decades with the advance of the agricultural frontier and with threats and attacks from the rural sectors of Brazilian agribusiness. And in the same time, the last 10 days, we also began to remove the non-indigenous people invaders from the Munduruku territory. Munduruku territory, like Yanomami territory, is one of the indigenous territories that suffer most from illegal mining. We usually had Munduruku, Kayapó, and Yanomami as these three most important territories that we can fight against illegal mining. And now we start to do it in Munduruku. These are concrete policies which face groups that are committed to the destruction of nature and indigenous rights, but that cannot depend solely on Brazil efforts. Because in Brazil we have rigid fiscal and budget limited, and in many that, like everyone knows, some sectors that are still very strong, that are denialist and against indigenous rights. As we understand that land tenure policy, as well as direct finance of indigenous organizations, are necessary policies for protecting nature and tackle indigenous climate change. We need this policy to continue regardless of the government, and that's why they need support international finance and policies. We are sure that this new pledge could be one of the great legacies of the COP30. Therefore, it will certainly be among the ministry's priorities for action in preparing to the COP. Because if the other fronts will be the indigenous face in the attempt to refresh the heart and the mind of the COP, this front is the one that wishes to connect the COP to the real world and challenge for indigenous peoples. Minister Sonia asked me to say that we are ready to go the next steps and join with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco, and it's fantastic to hear of Brazil's leadership and continued desire to lead on this up to COP30. Next, I would like to move to Peru and Vice Minister Soto. As the co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Platform, we're really appreciative and grateful of the leadership that you've shown on this agenda through the FCLP. So, Minister Soto, could you tell us a little bit more about how the commitments from governments on land tenure could help to scale efforts for a funding pledge at COP30?
Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Les transmito un afectuoso saludo del Ministerio del Ambiente de Perú. Y en el marco de la Alianza de Líderes por el Bosque y el Clima, FCLP, por sus siglas en inglés, durante la COP28 en Dubái 2023, se lanzó la plataforma de apoyo a los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales en la acción climática forestal. Esta iniciativa está actualmente coliderada por el gobierno de Noruega y Perú, reflejando nuestro firme compromiso con los derechos de tenencia de la tierra y la protección comunitaria de bosques, elementos fundamentales para la acción climática global. En el marco de dicha plataforma, nos hemos trazado la meta de lograr un acuerdo global para el reconocimiento de la tenencia de la tierra y los bosques de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, que se traduzca en un compromiso claro de un número de hectáreas por reconocer al 2030. Sabemos que alcanzar este objetivo no será sencillo, ya que cada país enfrenta realidades jurídicas y contextos nacionales únicos en cuanto al reconocimiento de la tenencia de la tierra. Por ello, como plataforma y como FCLP, buscamos construir este compromiso de manera inclusiva, colaborando estrechamente con los países interesados y otros actores durante los próximos meses hacia la COP30 en Brasil. Nos encontramos en un momento crucial donde las partes estamos revisando y elevando nuestros compromisos climáticos y a través de las contribuciones determinadas a nivel nacional, NDCs, y nuestras estrategias y planes nacionales como la de diversidad biológica. En este contexto, Perú ha desarrollado una medida de mitigación denominada Asignación de Derechos en Tierras No Categorizadas de la Amazonía, cuyo objetivo es otorgar derechos sobre el 50% de las áreas forestales sin categoría, lo que abarca aproximadamente 11 millones de hectáreas. Este esfuerzo incluye la titulación de comunidades nativas, la categorización de reservas indígenas para pueblos indígenas en aislamiento y contacto inicial, PIACI, así como la creación de nuevas áreas naturales protegidas a nivel nacional y principalmente a nivel regional. Reconocer los derechos de la tenencia de la tierra y fortalecer la protección comunitaria es una necesidad crítica para la sostenibilidad de nuestros ecosistemas. Por ello, lograr esta meta implica una estrecha cooperación entre los países con bosques tropicales y los países donantes, así como con otros aliados, de tal manera que no solo logremos anunciar un compromiso ambicioso de cara al 2025 con respecto a un número de hectáreas por reconocer, sino que también logremos contar con los recursos técnicos y financieros necesarios para poder cumplir esta meta. En Glasgow, durante la COP26, se lanzó un primer compromiso financiero de 1.5 mil millones de dólares al 2025 por parte de países y organizaciones filántropas para apoyar a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales de los países con bosques tropicales. Esperamos que nuestro compromiso de trabajo hacia el reconocimiento de la tenencia forestal y de tierras a favor de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales sea acompañado de un segundo compromiso de apoyo técnico y de financiamiento que contribuya a hacer realidad nuestra meta. Como miembros del FCLP y colíderes de la plataforma de apoyo a los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales en la acción climática forestal, Perú reafirma su compromiso con las metas globales como la Declaración de Glasgow sobre los bosques y el uso de la tierra. A nivel nacional, seguiremos trabajando nuestro compromiso con la acción climática bajo un enfoque multiactor, multinivel y multisectorial, con especial énfasis en el empoderamiento de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales para la gestión sostenible de nuestros bosques y sobre todo de los servicios ecosistémicos que estos nos proveen. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for reaffirming your political commitment to recognising land tenure as part of your wider commitment through your NDC. I'd like to move on now to Vice Minister Roa, who will talk a little bit more about the technical and financial support needed to achieve forest tenure goals. And we also wanted you to talk about why forest tenure and support of indigenous peoples is such a critical part of your NDCs and NBSAP. Thank you.
Bueno, buenos días a todas, a todos. Saludar especialmente a la plataforma por esta invitación, a todas y todos ustedes. Yo quisiera empezar reconociendo que ha sido la lucha de los pueblos indígenas de Colombia la que ha hecho que en 1991 se reconocieran los territorios colectivos y que esto diera lugar a la tenencia y propiedad y la creación de resguardos indígenas, el reconocimiento de esos territorios y también el reconocimiento de territorios de comunidades afrodescendientes. La tenencia de tierra en Colombia, en pueblos indígenas, alcanza más o menos un 29% del territorio continental, y esto tiene una implicación, y nombro eso porque esto tiene una implicación bastante grande. Son los territorios indígenas, son los territorios de comunidades afrodescendientes los mejor conservados del país. Son los pueblos indígenas los guardianes de esos territorios. Garantizar los derechos territoriales, ampliar los territorios de las comunidades indígenas, garantizar su gobernanza, es la garantía de que nosotros podamos avanzar en el cumplimiento de las NDC y del NBSAP. En ese sentido, hemos venido trabajando por ampliar la tenencia de territorios colectivos en Colombia, así como hemos venido fortaleciendo sus capacidades, dando reconocimiento como autoridad ambiental indígena a los pueblos indígenas en Colombia. En esa perspectiva hemos visto la necesidad de construir un trabajo de la mano de gobierno a gobierno, como decimos en Colombia. Es un trabajo conjunto con los pueblos indígenas para esta perspectiva en la que venimos trabajando, que garantice estos derechos territoriales y de esa manera garantizar la protección de los territorios. Hay que decir también que en estos territorios indígenas, como ya se decía anteriormente, hay grandes amenazas. Hay amenazas de minería ilegal, hay amenazas de procesos de acaparamiento de tierras, hay amenazas también de procesos agroindustriales, de la ganadería que se expande hacia los territorios indígenas. Sin embargo, siguen siendo los territorios indígenas contenciosos a esa deforestación. Es allí donde se expresan los menores niveles de deforestación en el país, y es por eso que ahí hemos puesto los esfuerzos para garantizar nuestras metas. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister. And thank you for your leadership in Cali at CBD COP16. It was really wonderful that you were able to bring together so many countries to talk about this issue. Thank you. Heike, I know you have to leave, so I'm sorry that you've had to wait so long. But given that Germany is coming in as the new co-chairs of the Forest Tenure Funders Group, please tell us about what your plans are for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here in this room, in this packed room with so many people with huge interest in this topic and a lot of patience. That's really great. As I have to run, the good thing is that I will not speak too long. But I really want to say that what we heard from Juan Carlos, from the three countries represented here, is really at the heart also what we as Germany see very important. We heard about really how forest and indigenous peoples and local communities are at the heart of the fight for nature, climate, and also development, because I would not separate the climate, the nature cause from really also human rights and development for indigenous peoples and local groups. And we heard all local communities, and we also heard about the complexity. Yes, it's about finance, like we discuss here a lot, but it's also about governance, it's about also rights and participation, how really all stakeholders, and specifically the right and knowledge holders, the indigenous peoples and local groups, local communities, can be part of the conversation. And I think this is what Germany, in our support for the Forest Tenure Pledge and also in the FCLP, tries to put high on our agenda. So we are happy to engage not only financially, but really with building strong ties and programs that put also IP&LC at the heart. Together with the UK, Norway and others, we have started a couple of joint initiatives in this respect. I will not name them all. So with this spirit really of taking the next step with the Forest Tenure Funders Group for the new pledge, really, like Juan Carlos, you called for not a pledge for IP&LC, but with IP&LC, and really see what is needed on the financial side, also on how to do things together in a better way, and how also governments represented here can work with all of us regarding the enabling environment for tenure for IP&LC. This is something that we will put high on our agenda, and we are very humbled to follow Norway and others in this path, and hope to be a good partner for all of you in this, and build on the momentum coming out of Cali, and certainly the momentum coming from Belém as well. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Heike. I think in the spirit of what Heike's just said and what we've heard from Juan Kerr and the countries represented so far, I know that the co-leads, Peru and Norway, are inviting countries to work together in the coming weeks and months to really prepare the ground for COP30. Finally, on this panel, I'll just pass over to Maggie Charnley, who's representing the UK. You've recently taken over the co-chairship of the FCLP with Guyana. Please talk about your expectations on the IPLC workstream.
Thank you, Charlie. Firstly, I would just like to say a huge thank you to the co-leads of the FCLP's Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities workstream, Peru and Norway, for all of their work to date in shaping and identifying how the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership can advance support with Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we're very much looking forward to our 2-year term as co-chairs of the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership with Guyana to progress critical action on forests with our partners. We know how critical IPLCs are if we are to stand any chance of reaching the 2030 goal to halt and reverse forest loss. Biodiversity indicators show declines of 30% less biodiversity loss, typically more slowly in lands not managed by Indigenous peoples. And deforestation rates are almost always lower in areas managed by IPLCs. But what we also know is that land tenure security is absolutely vital if IPLCs are able to deliver those goals. We know those differences between lands managed by IPLCs and those not are strongest where IPLCs have clear tenure over the lands in which they live and functioning customary governance systems. So it is our collective responsibility to help make sure that IPLCs have the security to practice their customary practices, to have a thriving culture, because we all stand to benefit from their guardianship. And that's why the UK remains committed in our ambitions to advancing land rights. Last week, here at COP29, our Foreign Secretary announced a commitment to a further 10 years of our flagship global programme for forest governance, markets and climate. This will support partner countries to strengthen forest governance in order to reduce illegal and unsustainable use of forest resources while benefiting forest-dependent people. A key part of the focus of FGMC will be the support of IPLC organisations, but also international advocacy to advance forest management and forest tenure rights. At the same event, our Foreign Secretary also announced a new multi-year Amazon-wide programme, the Amazon Catalyst for Forest Communities, to tackle the urgent challenge of deforestation in the Amazon basin. A key part of AMCAT will involve strengthening IPLC voices in national and international processes, as well as catalysing mobilisation of finance. We want to work with governments and IPLC representatives in partnership to bring shared messages to COP30. Brazil's commitment to IPLCs means this is a uniquely important opportunity to amplify IPLC voices. This will include the new pledge, as mentioned by Heike, but this time not a pledge from donors to IPLCs, but a pledge built in partnership with representatives from IPLC groups. Like other aspects of the transition to a net zero economy, delivering on the goal to halt and reverse forest loss will mean taking action on multiple fronts, from finance to governance to agriculture. Multilateral action, whether it's through the biodiversity or the climate conventions, will be key. And that's why we were so pleased to see the forest goal reflected in last year's global stocktake. We see the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership as complementing multilateral action by bringing together ambitious countries committed to investing political capital to tackling deforestation and driving practical action on the ground, but also in making sure that forests remain in the spotlight for climate change. Building on the work led by Colombia to put IPLCs at the heart of the 16th COP on biodiversity, CBD 16, we look forward to working with Brazil in the lead up to COP30, helping to support our shared ambitions on forests. FCLP is active across key issues for forests: carbon markets, indigenous peoples and local communities, sustainable timber and construction, and debt and innovative finance. We will work with the lead governments for each of these work streams to maintain a focus on action and results, and with an awareness that we cannot treat IPLCs as an isolated issue, but one where we need to carry those concerns and interests through all of the working groups of the FCLP. We will look forward to working closely with all of our partners, from the Global North, the Global South, the representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities, to accelerate action and deliver ambition outcomes. I wanted to finish on a bit of a personal note. I know we have a long way to go. I've been attending COPs for many years. I was at Kyoto in 1997. Never have IPLCs been more visible at COPs. I hope that the partnerships that we are building now are just the start. Climate change and biodiversity loss are collective concerns, and we need to work collectively to address them. We must use our positions of privilege to open the doors to others. I look forward to working in partnership to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panellists and for your patience. Please do go back to your seats or to your next commitment. We were meant to finish in 5 minutes' time, but we do have some more speakers. I don't think there's an event on at 11 o'clock. So for those speakers who are still able to be here, we would appreciate bringing you up to the stage to make some short remarks, if that's okay. So Evan, I can see that you're still sat down. If Evan, you could come up, the Senior Climate Specialist in USAID's Natural Climate Solutions Division. Pascal Martinez, Forest and Wildlife Thematic Lead at the Global Environment Facility. Roslyn Ajay, Director of Climate Change at Ghana's Forestry Commission. Nonette Royo, Executive Director at the Land Tenure Facility. And can I see Solange? Yes, I can see Solange, the Coordinator for the Rights and Resources Initiative, the President and Coordinator for the Rights and Resources Initiative. Hagar, I wondered if you could maybe close later, if that's okay. Sorry, we've just had to rejig things because of how we've been proceeding. So, first of all, if we could start with you, please, Evan. Could you start by talking to us about why it's important to address the collaboration for national governmental goals related to land tenure and indigenous peoples and local communities' rights?
Well, first of all, thank you for holding this event and inviting me here to talk a little bit about US's work. Perhaps to start, and I will keep my my comments brief, but I did actually want to highlight, as some of you may have seen, that President Biden was just in the Amazon, as historic visit as the first president to visit the Amazon, and made some really important announcements in terms of the U.S. commitment to supporting forest conservation in the Amazon as well as globally, and I wanted to highlight that in part to also, without going into the details of the programs that he highlighted, really reflect on the fact that these programs are really spanning the range of working with partners and at different levels. They actually reflect quite well what we see as some of the FCLP priority areas. And a very important part of this work in the Amazon is to work in partnership closely with IPLC groups working on indigenous rights and working on tenure. And I think that this work reflects a lot on on the approach that the U.S. and USAID has taken to looking at how we can help tackle the challenge of reducing deforestation and addressing climate change. Maybe just briefly to highlight as well some of the things that we've seen important in terms of how we've worked in partnership is USAID is kind of at the core of our work have since 2020. Yes, I think 2020 put forward a IP, Indigenous Peoples policy, that really is about how we work with Indigenous peoples at the core of all of our development work, not just in environment work, but understanding and ensuring that we are working from the beginning, from thinking about program design, working at stakeholder processes, ensuring that we are understanding the needs of Indigenous peoples and local communities, connecting with them, and thinking about how to integrate that into the program. Secondly, we have integrated working with local communities, Indigenous peoples, and local organizations as a core part of our USAID strategy on climate change, recognizing how important it is to work effectively with local groups, not just on our forest work, but across our range of climate change work. But this has been an important element of how we've tackled this problem. And I think I really commend the statements that we heard from Peru and Colombia and Brazil in terms of looking to partner and address Indigenous peoples and land tenures rights as a core of their climate work. And we really acknowledge how important it is to think about how to address the challenges of indigenous peoples' rights and tenure at multiple levels. So working to begin with, ensuring that we are partnering, understanding the needs of indigenous peoples and addressing the concerns around tenure, but also understanding how we can work with all the stakeholders involved, including national and local governments, thinking about how the private sector can be involved and their understanding of how important things like bringing in investment and support to communities is really dependent and is tied to good land tenure rights and issues. So given that we're very short on time, I'm going to stop there, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan. And I think probably one of the other... Sorry. I think another one of the key stakeholders in this piece are the multilateral development banks and the international development financial institutions. And we have Pascal Martinez here from the Global Environment Facility. And Pascal, if you could please explain to us some of the progress that's been made by the new Global Biodiversity Framework Fund and its promise to invest 20% of its funds to financing IPLCs. And more generally, how multilaterals can do better in supporting IPLC finance.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I think it's very important for us to be part of this process because the IPLCs are very, very high in our agenda too. No? When we speak about direct finance, it's not about moving money from. Sorry, it's not about moving money from one account to another account. It's more complex than that, and also it depends on each organization. No, so it's not a binary thing. No? So I think that there is something that we need to incorporate in our reflection is the principles that have been laid out by the indigenous people. They are key to work together in a way that it is still direct access, direct finance, but maybe not as moving money, as simple as that. No? So this question of the principles of the indigenous people are very, very important to consider. And in the specific case of the GEF, we have many different entry points, funding windows, no? Because our work on forest is key. It's about between 25-20% of the GEF resources go to forests. So as indigenous people and local communities are very important in the forests, it's are logically key stakeholder actors. And so we have the country allocation that can be used. We have also the GBFF that you just mentioned, the new fund. Inclusive Conservation Initiative is also another program specifically focused on supporting the indigenous people and local communities. We have a small grant program. We have also this big program, the biggest program of GEF 8 on primary forest. It's a very important program where the local communities and indigenous people are key in terms of stakeholders. But of course, given the scale of our finance, it's not always easy to have this kind of direct access. We need some intermediaries, no, to manage the funds, to negotiate with the stakeholders, to make procurement, for instance. So sometimes we need this kind of intermediaries, even if at the end of the day, the executing partners are the IPLCs on the ground. No? And well, I mentioned this program, Inclusive Conservation Initiative. It's a $25 million program from the GEF, precedent GEF, but which is there is another version now being discussed. In this particular case, it's more than 80% of the resources from the program that goes directly to the IPLCs. So it's concrete, you know. So there is different kind of mechanisms, but this is the money that really goes directly to the communities. And regarding this new fund, the GBFF, it has been already decided 2 years ago, and today this fund is already running. We have about 20 projects, approved projects. 60 projects are under review. So can you imagine, the fund was decided, not created, only 2 years ago, and we are already running it. And yes, in this fund we have this aspirational goal to have at least 20% of the resources dedicated directly to the IPLCs. It is one of the I would say only one of the several selection criteria, but it's a very important selection criteria for us to decide whether a project is eligible or not. Because I mentioned 60 projects being under review now, but we receive much more than that because we use this selection criteria. So I think that, and in this case for the GBFF, we have a very good example from Brazil. In this particular project, the funds are supporting 15 local territories directly. It is executed by an NGO, but an NGO that already worked with the same communities in the past, and the communities that what is doing what I was mentioning before is helping the negotiation, the procurement, so all the burden administrative that needs to be done for this magnitude of project. No. So it's useful, but still the project is directly executed by the communities. And this is a very good example of how also a government agrees to give access to the executing functions and to the resources to a community. Because this is what maybe was the last part of what I wanted to say, is that also it depends on the government. It's very important how the government will allow this direct access to resources, so direct executing functions. And this is the case of Brazil, but maybe not the case always of all the countries that do that. And it is very also important moving forward that also the countries are aligned with their position in terms of giving us the possibility to give access. Because some countries sometimes not necessarily align when we hear country at the biodiversity or climate COP, they may not necessarily align with where they push us to go in our own governing bodies. So it is very important also that if we were to move towards a better commitment to support IPLCs, that also the donor countries are aligned with all what they want to do, regardless the different framework, no? And this is, I think, important, and I wanted to let it here, and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. I want to pass now over to Rosalind. So we've heard a lot already from Peru, Brazil, Colombia today about some of the challenges around securing land tenure. But from Ghana's perspective, if you could give us an insight into some of the challenges you've faced in securing land tenure and what kind of support is needed to overcome those barriers, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Very good morning to everybody here. Thank you for having Ghana as well. So in Ghana, we have two categories of forest land. We have where we have gazetted, that's where government manages, and then we have the off-reserve. So we have on and off-reserve. Now the on-reserves are gazetted, and the lands belong to stoolants who are known, sometimes they are families, sometimes they are traditional authorities, local chiefs. But for the off-reserve areas also, we still have those arrangements. Now for the forest reserve areas that are on reserve, these areas, government acknowledges that the land is not for government, but government manages the resources on the land. And there is a sharing arrangement. If there is any revenue from those lands, we have what goes to the stoolants, what goes to the local communities, and also the traditional authorities. So there is really no contention on that land because that's documented. Where the issue is the off-reserve, where you still have forest land, where we also have farmlands. These are lands that have been passed on through different generations. Most of them don't have any paperwork to them. And so being able to secure them for particular people sometimes becomes a challenge. You would realize that a family head might be the one who is in charge of it, but the family is a big group. So who does what? Most times it is left to the prerogative of the family head to decide to allocate a particular area. Also, our patriarchal system poses a challenge sometimes because we have the patriarchal system in most of our communities. So that's where the issues of also women owning land comes in. However, even though we have these challenges, every farmer or local community member in Ghana has access to use land. And I think we need to decipher these things. Ownership is one thing, then access to use the land is also another thing. Every local community member has access to use land. However, owning that land, then you need to get into documentation. So I think one of the big solutions that we need is to support local communities to document their land rights. If we don't have proper documentation, even in our ER programs, it becomes difficult to identify who to give what to. That is why in Ghana, we built our ER programs around who manages the land and not who owns the land, because that can get into many contentions when people don't have the right documentation. But in terms of who manages the land, we have cocoa farmers and other farmers who join cooperatives, who have cocoa registration cards. Not all of them have, but majority of them have. So that becomes a form of identification for us to certify that they are using these lands. Then there's also another area where we have challenges with caretakers. So we have so many lands that are also being managed by caretakers. They are not farmers per se, but they are taking care of the farm for the farmer. So then that also becomes a challenge when they stay on the land for so many years. Some of them begin to get entitled to it, or they begin to encroach into forest areas so they can also have access to land of their own. So these are some of the key challenges that we face, and constitutionally, documentation is one thing that would help us. Without documentation, it becomes difficult to secure tenure rights for these off-reserve areas where we have so many families that have passed on these lands, barely with any paper or documentation to their people. And in this age of digital or digitalization, it can become very easy for us to do that, because when you pick the GPS locations of these lands, you can easily plot them, and from anywhere in the world, if you have the title to it, you can then demonstrate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Nonette, sorry, I'm aware you have to leave. And we've just heard from a very powerful national perspective of what challenges there are in Ghana, but from your international perspective and working in many different countries, are there any themes that you've come across that are barriers to securing land tenure?
I have three really important themes, and I transform barriers into really qualities of what would really secure tenure. We're operating in 20 countries, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, tropical rainforest countries targeting 60 million hectares, reaching 15 million people just for tenure facilities, to emphasize. So the three qualities: quality of data. So working with indigenous peoples and local communities, mapping their boundaries, provide not only indigenous peoples but also government data sets, data collectors with ground truth information. Every time we go to the field, government accompany, because they cannot actually go without issues. The processes that the communities put together are trusted. So that data is important. That data brings peace, because that data allows everyone to agree where the boundary is, and this also has FPIC. It complies with FPIC, free and prior informed consent. Second is the ability for an integrated approach in government to happen. The ministries of environment, Ministry of Land, Ministry of Forest come together because they need the same data. So that's really important. The third is the power of convening. So the power of convening is coming from the community. They are in the forests, but they are in local governments, national governments, talking to their governments. And they're making this come together. And you know what? The governments actually like this here, globally. If the community says, we like to work with government, we are reaching these common targets, the government feels good. They met their NDCs. So those three, yeah? Quality of data, work with communities. integrated approach is very important that they bring together. And the third is really this power of convening. It's for all of us. It's for all of us reaching that target. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nanette. And I think we really hope that the platform on Indigenous peoples can act as a really useful forum for that convening at a global level. So thank you for raising that in particular. Solange, sorry to come to you last. RRI has launched the Path to Scale goal, the 400 million hectares. Could you please update us on progress of that ambition and how any kind of intergovernmental commitment can support delivery?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to second what Nanette has said, because that's exactly what needs to be done. But what I will add is there has been progress, and we have seen that government have been adopting new laws and policies recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And of course, it has not been at the scale that we want, but it's happening. For example, in 2018, we have done an analysis looking at the trends of opportunities in community-based forestania reforms, looking from 2002 till 2017, over 15 years. So what we have learned is that the forest area legally recognized for indigenous peoples and local communities in 41 countries, we have seen progress from 74 million hectares in 2002 to 521 million hectares in 2017, meaning that from 10% to over 15%. But also over 98% of these gains occurred in 33 low and middle income countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So based on that, we have done the matrix at RRI, and we realized from 2020 to 2030, we can add 400 million hectares really to get there. And like Nanette said, with all the new laws and policies, implementation has been a real challenge, right? So, and that's the reason why actually RRI created the tenure facility in 2013, because we realized while laws have been recognized and adopted, the implementation was a gap. So to me and for us at RRI, moving forward is what is the path to scale? And when we say the path to scale is how do we scale up the land, the recognition of land and forestania rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And for that, I have 3 points to share where we have to work with government, but not only government, but also work with indigenous network like GATC, work with civil society organization and with donors to see how we can implement. And I think that's what actually the FCLP is trying to do. The one thing is the need to establish an adequate legal framework and enabling environment, ensuring that legal or judicial system recognize indigenous peoples and local community rights. The second is implementation at sub-national level. Government should develop mechanisms and protocol to implement laws and policies and also build the business case and lessons learned. And third, implementation at the national level. And I think that's what the tenure facility is really trying to do. How do we expand implementation at the national level and at scale, and doing that through coordination? One thing is the path to scale, but another thing is the path to transformation, because although it's not only about recognizing land and forestania rights, but how do we transform the lives of indigenous peoples and local communities on the ground? Here also I would like to share 3 things quickly. One is engage leaders in social public policy, but also economic system to consider rights-based reforms. And second, we need to catalyze adoption of right-based development business and include also the private sector into what we do. Because as we know, it's not only government, but also the private sector is playing a key role. And third, also, it's instigate public and private policy reform to like embed right-based model in social, like in economic systems. But with all of that, we need to support the enabling environment, because that's what also many donors are not willing to. But how do we bring donors to support that enabling environment? Meaning, how do we build the capacity of local communities so they can manage the fund, they can really do what they have to do on the ground? Livelihoods also is very key. Because what we have been hearing from the right holders movement is, okay, one thing is to have tenure rights recognized, but if you cannot really, eat or get what you need, then having your right might not be really useful. So supporting the enabling environment, the coordination, again, among donors, civil society organization, right holders organization, I think that will help us really to reach the 400 million hectares goal by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solange. I think those clear lists from yourself and Nonette on the challenges and the barriers demonstrate that there is really good knowledge of what we need to do, and now it's a case of really figuring out the process for moving that work forward. Thank you for being so brief, panelists. Really appreciate that, and thank you for your time. We'll have one final intervention. If I could ask Hege to come up, please, who Policy Director at the Norwegian Ministry of Environment and Climate. Thank you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Thank you. So it's my name is Hege Ragnesveit, and as Charlie said, I'm the Policy Director from the Norwegian International Climate and Forest Initiative in the Ministry of Climate and Environment in Norway, and we've had the honor, we're having the honor to co-chair the action area for supporting indigenous peoples and local communities together with Peru in the FCLP. This year, we've also had the honor of chairing the Forest Tenure Funders Group. So before I summarize this session, I'd like to give you some really good news. And that is that the funders are not just on track, but we're ahead of the game. We think that we will exceed the $1.7 billion commitment that we made in Glasgow. We have, in the first 3 years of the pledge, disbursed more than 1.3 billion, and with 2 more years to go, we're very, very much on track. So thanks to all the funders for that accomplishment. However, that would not have been possible without the strong partnerships that we've seen developing with indigenous organizations like the ATC, your members, and many others, and of course with the tropical forest governments that have made these systemic shifts possible. FCLP is all about creating systemic shifts in how we govern forests, because that's the only way we can halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. And working together with indigenous peoples and local communities in tropical forest countries is really a key strategy for achieving those goals. So what we have heard here today, I think, is very high-level political commitment across the board from tropical forest countries like Brazil, Ghana, Colombia, and Peru. If we had time, we would have invited even more countries that could have told about their accomplishments, because as we heard in the last panel, there is progress. There's a lot of progress, and we can progress even more. We've also heard from key donors and leaders in the FCLP, like the US. I'd like to thank you for your leadership in the outgoing period, UK, our new chair, and from Germany, as well as from the Global Environment Facility, that donors and funders are really committed both on delivering on the existing pledge, but also to work in partnership with indigenous organizations in developing a new financial pledge. So we hear about 2 different types of commitment: a political commitment from tropical forest countries to scale up recognition of indigenous territories and titles. And then we hear a commitment from funders to work on a new period for a pledge. For that to become a reality, both for policies to be implemented on the ground, as well as for funding to flow in an efficient way to communities, we need to build this big global partnership. So I'd also like to recognize the partnership of international organizations like, of course, the whole UN family, the multilaterals like GEF and World Bank and others, as well as key civil society partners who have been advocating for these issues for decades. I think many of us here in this room have worked on these issues for several decades, and we've never, as Maggie said, seen these issues elevated to the level we see today, both in terms of politics as well as in terms of finance. So thanks to all of you for your leadership, and we're really taking your baton, Chico, that we're going to COP30 next year, and we will work together to make this one of the big legacies of COP30. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I think that brings proceedings to an end. So thank you very much.